is the internet court of truth and lies. If you've got something in the media that you think's the truth or you think it's a lie, then you can test your belief in truthcourt.net as a plaintiff, where you make your case to up to 8 jurors. The skeleton for the case is a set of 8 questions that are not the best questions for any given situation, but they do allow you to dissect whether something's a truth or a lie. The way the questions work is they're mainly oriented toward dissecting whatever is asserted as a lie, because if it's not a lie, it'll be assumed to be the truth, particularly if you assert that it's the truth. That's the way this thing works. Truth court was not designed as a sovereign court where there's a single decision by the jurors as to whether or not something's the truth or a lie. In fact, the case today is going to really dig into the nature of truths and lies. Hopefully it'll be an interesting case. I'm the plaintiff, and I call it Trumper. This case is about an article that I wrote in Medium, where the function of the article is to discuss the question of whether or not any sentence in any natural language can be either a truth or a lie. In other words, it's possible to state that sentence and not change it, but it can be interpreted as the truth or a lie. That is the case that I'm making. I say this contains a proof that contextual predication can change any sentence into a truth or a lie. I want to pursue that idea that there's a proof, because proof is a very odd word. It means different things in different contexts. But what I want to do is talk about the kind of proof you can have for whether or not any sentence can be a truth or a lie. The version of the paper that originally went out, that was the basis for this recording here, where Robot Love read the paper, I added another section to it in the last week or so to dig a little deeper into that. I titled the thing, "I've decided to become a Trumper." And then I said, "This is a lie." I lied about my lie. I said I meant the title to be Thumper, not Trumper. That's the lie. And so I drew this little picture of a rabbit at the White House, and I've decided to become a Thumper as opposed to a Trumper. I've recently gotten really upset with YouTubes that lie in their titles in order to get you to watch them. And so I was just having fun with that and saying, okay, here we go. But what I really want to talk about is a way to prove that any sentence can be a truth or a lie. One of the ways to do the proof is to ask an LLM to take a sentence and tell us 20 ways in which that sentence can be a lie. And then take that same sentence and ask it how that sentence can be true. This is a kind of a proof by what's called enumeration. I could take any sentence and list all the ways in which it could be a lie or it could be the truth. And if I can always do that, then the argument is I've made a proof by enumeration. Now, it's a partial enumeration. So, for example, we don't know if we said to Grok, give me 1,000 ways in which it could be a truth or 1,000 ways in which it could be a lie. It almost certainly could do that. But then you'd get into problems of whether or not some of the ways in which it could be the truth are too highly redundant. There's not enough ways in which a sentence can be a truth or a lie. There may be some quantitative way to measure the number of ways. I believe there probably is one, but since you can contextualize with all kinds of imaginations what fiction is all about, then it's probable that Grok could give you 1,000 answers. And it would be interesting to see what it does. I don't know what it would do. I'm guessing the newer versions of Grok and the newer versions of ChatGPT and so forth and so on would do a pretty good job of it. Some of the older versions wouldn't do a good job of it. This particular proof by enumeration, technically it's a proof by partial enumeration. It says take any sentence and have Grok tell you the ways it can be a lie and the ways it can be a truth. And if all the ways seem plausible, seem like they make sense, then the proof is done. The partial enumeration is done. Show me an instance where that cannot be done is the question. But you could also ask Grok, show me how this cannot be done and see if it answers. Who knows what it's going to say. There's another class of proof that's used in law a lot, which is a proof by direct observation. But you can tell if something's true if, for example, I hold up a pair of scissors with a blue handle and I say this pair of scissors has a blue handle. That's a direct observation truth. If I say this pair of scissors has a red handle, that's a lie by direct observation. But direct observation is used in law, for example, as a basis of the evidence that could be used in a trial, that there were direct observations of a crime or whatever. That's the basis for science. That's what Descartes wrote when he became sort of the father of modern science. He said, the only reality we can really know is reality by direct observation. Anything else is suspect as to whether or not that's really reality. He proposed this notion that knowledge should be developed strictly by deductions from direct observation. What's interesting is that this proof by enumeration doesn't do that. What it does is the direct observation is all these contexts that I can generate, that Grok could generate. And these would be hard for a person to generate this many contexts because you can do it, but not at the speed that Grok can do it. The proof by enumeration is not a direct, the direct observation there is that sentence and its context, the proposed context, does make that sentence sensible and does make that sentence a truth or a lie. That's the direct observation you're making. But it's an enumeration in the sense that it doesn't prove that any sentence can be a truth or a lie. Clearly, there's this question of, is the sentence, this handle is blue, is that a lie? And I think the answer, if you think about it a little bit, is you don't actually know that I'm holding up a pair of scissors right now, or that I'm holding up a blue pair of scissors with a blue handle. This could all be AI. I could be lying about that, even though you'd think that I couldn't, but now we know I could. That's a direct observation thing. Now, if we were sitting in the same room and I held up that pair of scissors, that would get really awfully hard to say that this pair of scissors has a handle that's blue is a lie. But I could say that I didn't mean that. What I wanted to say was that the blue that's in the background and this blue are not the same. And so what I could say is I could sit there and say, you're observing that this handle is blue, but your observation is wrong because you don't understand what kind of blue I meant. I could start turning this into a lie by context, by providing context. So I could take direct observation and turn that into a lie. Certainly in law and legal cases, we see people doing that same kind of thing. Another piece of this is that both truths and lies sometimes depend on intent. And intent is something that you just can't know what the actual intent is. If you look at these contextual conversions or predications by Grok, you'll see a lot of these are where Grok is manipulating intent in order to get the sentence to be a truth or a lie. I'll take a few of these right now.
Become a Trumper can be lie. Here are 20 distinct ways in which the statement, "I've decided to become a Trumper," can be a lie. The speaker has made no decision at all about political affiliation. The speaker has actually decided not to support Trump or identify as a Trumper. The speaker was already a longtime Trump supporter, so there is nothing new to become. The speaker is only pretending for social, professional, or relational advantage and does not believe it. The choice was forced by external pressure, family, job, peer group, and was not a free personal decision. The speaker does not know or understand what Trumper means and is using the word incorrectly. The statement is pure sarcasm or irony meant to convey the opposite. The speaker has the decision was made in the distant past and is no longer operative. The present tense claim is false. The speaker intends only a temporary or situational pose, not a genuine conversion, simply repeating a phrase they heard without any personal decision having occurred. To Grok, tell me 20 ways in which that sentence could be truth. Here are 20 distinct ways in which the statement, "I've decided to become a Trumper," can be true. The speaker has genuinely reflected on the issues and freely chosen to support Trump and adopt the label. After previously being opposed, neutral, or undecided, the speaker has now switched sides. The decision followed careful research into policies, record, and alternatives. Recent events, economic data, or cultural shifts convinced the speaker to change affiliation. The speaker was never a Trump supporter before and is now committing for the first time. No external pressure or coercion was involved. The choice was entirely voluntary.
This is structuring the context in which it makes something true. Of course, you're really not determining whether or not something is the truth or a lie. What's being said in general is this enumeration method. It tells you something about how natural language actually works. Any sentence can be a truth or a lie. What I added at the end was a proof that I put in my book. There's an interesting sentence out there. There are variants on this sentence, but this has been discussed for many years. So this particular sentence, there's a literature on this sentence, believe it or not. The sentence is, "This sentence is a lie." So the kind of literature says, if it's a lie, then it can't be true that this sentence is a lie, which can't be a lie since this sentence is true. So this sentence cannot be either a truth or a lie. That's what the literature says. The problem with that is that it can be interpreted as the truth or a lie. In other words, a person can listen to it, and by the way, this is in the literature as well. A person can listen to it and find it to be a truth or a lie and believe it as a truth or a lie. In other words, they don't see the contradiction when they read the sentence or hear the sentence. You can show how that works by turning the sentence into a truth or a lie by predicating it with another sentence. So you can say, this sentence is the truth, this sentence is a lie, therefore it must be a lie. You presumed that this sentence is the truth. And so when it says this sentence is a lie, that it must be a lie. You don't go to the next step. This sentence is a lie. It must be true. So it must be true that this sentence is a lie. Again, you don't go to the next steps. So, but it does prove that from the point of view of how things are comprehended, sentences can be seen as a truth or a lie. Even a sentence for which the logical analysis of the sentence says that it can neither be a truth or a lie. So this is a really interesting situation. To my mind, it proves that any sentence can be a truth or a lie, but it's not by enumeration, it's by disambiguation. So that's a different technique for proof. You basically disambiguate what you mean by this sentence that would normally, that could easily be taken as nonsense. But it's not being taken as nonsense. The odd thing is it's not taken as nonsense. So you can make up a sentence that is grammatically incorrect. The semantics mean nothing. So you can mix words up and you can say is, lie, sentence A, this. Who knows what that means? That's like a non-comprehensible one where you're making up scenarios to try to make it comprehensible. So there is such a thing as a nonsense sentence, but this sentence is a lie is not one of those things. It makes sense, except it's got a logical underpinning that makes it oddly not make sense. But you can disambiguate that by asserting whether or not it's the truth or a lie and saying in a contextual sentence, and then hoping the person doesn't jump off into what the sentence actually says, because it'll get interpreted one way or interpreted as the other. In other words, it'll be thought in the first case that if the sentence is a lie, it must be a lie, because that's what the person told you how to interpret it. And that's okay, because I'll interpret it that way. Or this sentence is a lie. It must be true because you'll interpret it that way. So you get into the same thing. Any sentence can be a truth or a lie, even a sentence that's logically inconsistent as to whether or not it's truth or a lie, as long as it makes sense, which this one may make.
Yeah, but that's as long as it makes sense. You're giving it its definition already.
I know. I'm very aware of that. But ephemerally, you can create a circumstance under which, for at least a few moments, the person is fine with it. And then maybe they'll never catch the problem. But for a few moments, they're fine with it, okay? Because they can see it that way. Then they realize if they catch it at all, some people don't catch it. By the way, experiments have been done on this sentence. So some people never catch it, never catch the problem. Okay. They just don't see the problem. They'll interpret it one way or the other. Typically, they believe that this sentence is a lie is the truth. That's the kind of default. Somebody who doesn't catch it will think it's the truth. And then they'll realize that if they think about it a little bit, they'll say, wait a minute. It can't be the truth when it asserts that it's a lie.
There's a very nice version of this, which is a card, and it's got sentence on each side. First, one side it says the sentence on the other side of this card is false, and you turn it over, it says the sentence on the other side of this card is true.
Yeah,
it
that's a good point.
It quite well.
Yeah, and this is crazy, but there's a real literature on this sentence. This is not one article. This sentence has been studied for years and years. There's some slight variants on it. What you just mentioned is one kind of variant, and that card trick has many variants, and you can actually use the card trick to come up with a lot of variants on it. But it's been around. So this is a really interesting thing. So this is all in the question of what is proof, and the answer is, I don't think we can prove that any sentence can be a truth or a lie the way you can prove a geometry proof, for example. where the premises are known, where the premises are established as true or false premises, and there's no other context allowed. And within that closed domain, you can prove that something is true. Okay. And that's where you get into these logical proofs, which do work. And within those domains, as long as you prohibit any further contextualization beyond what you allow, which is what you're doing when you're doing geometry proofs, for example, or some other types of proofs, you can make sure that whatever the assertion is true within that limited context. So you could say within that context it's true, or within that context it's a lie or false. Then you can make that unambiguous. So you can set up any context around it, but you can set up a context around it to make even that not work, which is an interesting thing. This is a crazy thing to assert as the truth, but I believe it is always the truth in the way in which we're saying it. But the proofs that we can show are never perfect proofs. It's not like in geometry, you can show perfect proofs. By the way, Descartes, this is the beginning of his book where he goes into geometry and he says, here's a case where we can establish proof that something is the truth or a lie or untrue. It's not descriptive of reality. He says what he's going to try to do in his book is try to establish proof that isn't perfect proof, but you recognize it as perfect. Okay. That's where he gets into the rules of evidence and law and stuff like this, and direct observation. And he bases it all on empirical observation, direct observation. This purpose in the book is actually to establish what this perception of proof that you get in geometry, Euclid. In his case, geometry was really established 400 years ago by Euclid's proofs. That's the way it goes. But anyways, that's my case. And what I'd like to do is I'll say what the obvious verdicts are. Is it the truth? I said yes. What I really like about this is you can use an LLM, Grok, to demonstrate that by enumeration, each sentence can be a truth or a lie by contextual predication, as predicted by the perceptron theory of brain computation, which is, it is predicted this way. Is it the whole truth? There's some steps that need to be taken for a formal proof. This needs to be containerized to be established as a proof, and we really don't know how to do that. Once we allow external predications to come in, it doesn't have a way to containerize the premises and also the logic that's used. And the other one is to point out the intent behind the statement. Is it nothing but the truth? I said yes. I don't, again, there's a lot of literature that discusses this kind of stuff. Some of the best literature, by the way, is the legal literature on these things. So there are whole beautiful books written by brilliant people that are discussing exactly these kinds of issues. So if you ever got into this and to trying to understand what constitutes proof that something's true or proof that something's a lie, then there's a literature, and one of the best places to look is actually the theory of law. There are theorists that are brilliant people who discussed exactly this sort of thing. Plus the deceit, I said there's the truth, that any sentence could be a truth or a lie. I don't believe there was any deceit there. I think the truth is intended. I believe that the motivation is to be informative. What's social acceptability? I say it's an important aspect of any human natural language sentence that illustrates the fundamental neuronal computation as a predication, which we can observe directly in natural language. This is something the brain does, human brains do. and we can see it in how they speak, how they use, how they communicate. What label would improve the social acceptability of the truth or lie? And I said, no, no labels needed. So what I want to do is go through the jurors and get each juror to give me a brief 20 or 30-second summary of their verdict, whether or not they're convinced of the idea that any sentence can be a truth or a lie. So juror one.
Am I juror one?
Yeah.
I think it makes sense overall when it comes to being able to describe that in that sort of way.
Okay. So juror two.
That's me, Bob. I have to say that pretty much the same thing as before. I agreed with your verdicts and stuff. So it all, yeah. But
So
yeah.
so juror three, I hope, is Brian. I don't know.
Yeah, it's me. It's me.
You're the one who could tear me up. I'm just curious.
I'm not. There's no need. There's no need to tear you up here. It's just one of those things where I hate the way that you tend to use definitions very loosely, and you tend to go against societal conventions when doing so. And it means that it because like predication, for example. Predication means an assertion or an affirmation, but you use it in the context of establishing a predicate for an idea. Now, I don't disagree with you on that, but you also use it in the context of lying, which necessarily requires intent. So you're creating definitions with these words and just manufacturing things that make it very confusing. Now, that may be something that's cool in academia, but it can make it confusing for the lay people. So for me, I look at this and I go, you're absolutely right. You can predicate, as long as you predicate something with anything you want, then you can make anything mean anything. So if we say, you know what, everybody, the sun is a giant ice cream cone, then the giant ice cream cone rises in the east every morning. Not the sun, a giant ice cream cone. It's not a giant ball of incandescent gas. It's a giant ice cream cone. Why? Because we say so. So you're right about that. Anything can be predicated to be a lie. Anything can be predicated to be nonsense. But that's a truism. It doesn't move the ball. It's just a truism. So I get you. You're correct. But to what end?
So to my end, this is something that cannot be denied about how human brains compute.
That's 100% accurate.
So there are people who deny this. They say that human brains do not compute this way. I say, no, they do. Okay. If you have a theory of brain computation and it cannot do this, then it's an insufficient theory of brain computation. That's where I'm coming from on it. What was interesting to me was that I didn't define lie or truth to Grok. It did.
Yes,
which is really interesting. Version. Yeah, it really did. And you kind of go through its list of ways to make it a lie, and they're plausible, and their list of ways to make it a true, and they're plausible.
Yeah.
But it was defining lie as people normally talk about lies.
Yeah. Which makes sense. It is what it is. But anyway, yeah, as far as your premise goes, I think you're 100% right. And anybody who says no, I would ask them, please give me an example to the contrary, because I don't think one exists.
I don't think one exists either. So I think that in a closed system, you can argue it. So if I close the premise environment, yes, I can.
Yeah.
But as long as the premise environment is open for discussion, I can't.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah,
anyway,
that's the argument. The argument is that I can do it in a closed system. I cannot do it in an open system because the human brain just doesn't permit it, because the human brain knows that anything can be a truth or a lie.
Yeah, you're 100%. Thank you.
Yeah. Juror 4.
Hi. So what you're saying is that AI, this is how AI thinks also? Did you say you put it to Grok or?
Yeah, I put it together. You saw the questions I asked. Was that? Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. I just wondered if AI was trained in this way.
No. AI is trained as a perceptron model, and perceptrons naturally do this. This is what perceptron systems naturally do. This comes from the study of how do you make a machine human. which is what I've been doing for 50 years. And the answer is you can do it. You can show how neurons compute using this perceptron model, and a natural outcome of that is this observation that you can make that in any sense can be a truth or a lie.
Agreed. Okay.
It's the way it works. And so perceptron models predict it. A logical system will not predict it because logical systems don't know how to operate outside the context, outside of these bounded contexts. They just don't.
Interesting. Thank you.
Yeah. Juror 5.
That's me, Bob. Yeah, I believe you. I'm just trying to.
This is a really interesting problem.
But just on the point, LLMs can be trained to lie, right? They
No,
can
they
be
don't.
trained.
They're not just trained. You can train them to lie, but you can also. LLMs are humanoid. They are humans. They are human brains. Okay, they will naturally lie accidentally, and you can also train them to lie very readily. We know that too. It's a property of the fact that they are perceptron systems. They compute like perceptron systems, and human brains compute like perceptron systems.
Yeah.
That's what you got. Yeah.
I just thought of an analogy. Right? A broken clock is correct 2 minutes out of 1,440 minutes. Is that clock working or not? So you could ask the question, does the clock work? And you could say that the clock works for 2 minutes a day.
Yeah. That's containerizing the truth of the statement. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you can do that. So if you establish the right premises about what you mean,
Premise, yeah.
this is the thing that Brian was saying, that I'm too loose with words, and my argument is that humans are always too loose with words.
Okay.
This is what words are for. They're a way in which one brain can talk to another brain in the language that the brain speaks. And it's what it is.
Yeah.
It's just what it is. It's what it was evolved to be. One of the examples I gave earlier was their basic function is to intuit truth. If their function was to prove truth, which intuiting truth can do real proofs, but if the brain really computed like just a pure deductive system, then the animals wouldn't survive because as they say, the mouse would have to wait for the snake to eat them before it could prove that the snake was dangerous.
Yeah.
And by then, that's a moot point. And so the mouse never would have survived. We know this, for example, if you got an adult mouse and you put it in a cage with a snake that's never seen the snake, the mouse will respond by jumping away from the snake.
That's because some mice were eaten.
So what happened was there's memory built into the mice from inheritance that tells them that thing's probably dangerous. Now there are stupid mice, so if the mouse is young enough, the mouse could be overwhelmed by curiosity, which is what the snake is counting on, as they say.
Yeah.
This is crazily interesting stuff because it bears on so much. It really reveals something about all humans. So Juror 6.
Yeah, that's me. You're certainly right about YouTube, the descriptions of YouTube, because it drives me mad. I watch a lot of chess. I enjoy the chess. The epic games are most incredible. It's just complete lies for most of it. It's very annoying. I have to say, though, I do disagree with this idea that all these sentences can be true or false, because it makes no sense in an evolutionary terms. If everything was ambivalent, then meaning is not functional enough for evolution to work. And all you're doing is you're only satisfying the context of the receiver rather than yourself, rather than the person who's made the utterance.
So the counter argument to one you just made is that deceit computation, for intuiting truth, it's just as important for survival to intuit that the truth is that this is a deceit.
But you're going to use that context you've got to have, the context has got to have enough actual information for it to work. Because if you keep, like if Grok keeps on creating sentences and sentences, eventually his sentences will imply knowledge that cannot be applied or used, and therefore it doesn't work as
we don't know how. So Chomsky's argument on that is that no, it's infinite, a practical infinity. Okay, so his argument was the number of ways a sentence can be interpreted is a practical infinity, and he was making the same argument when he made this. He made that argument like 1959 or something. And I've actually tried to enumerate all the ways, and there's just no end to it. It's crazy. Now, if you limit the predication to a single sentence, so you're containerizing the thing. Okay. Yes, you can limit it, but as long as it's not containerized.
I still hold with the idea that eventually you're going to come up, and if it's not containerized, you're going to end up with utterances that imply knowledge that cannot be verified, at least don't apply to the situation in hand, and therefore don't work. However, I would like to add that I find it interesting that Grok did not come up with the actual reason for that sentence, which was a misprint. And I'm pretty sure that if you had a brainstorming human session, somebody would probably come up with ideas like misprints and stuff. Actually, I'm referring to something that somebody said in the chat earlier. What's happening is with Grok and with all these things is they're converging towards banality, a central median thing, and all inspiration and the unusualness of the human mind is just simply going to be eradicated or simply not be used in all these LLMs and particular.
So generative AI is a slightly different situation. It is still perceptrons. What they're doing is they're guessing the truth of what you're seeing, and so they then use their knowledge about how to improve the view. This is all perceptron computation. One of the things that the guy who got the Nobel Prize, Hinton, did in some of his papers and talks, these are just neural networks. This is all he did was neural networks, got a Nobel Prize in it. So he would train up a system to, I don't know, recognize things that are in pictures. Okay. Dogs, cats, automobiles, whatever, people's faces, and whether or not they were happy or sad, and so forth and so on. But then he would turn off the input, the external input to the system. He would run the system backwards. He would say, now imagine a dog, and it could generate a picture of a dog that you've never seen before, that it had never seen before, but it was the perfect image of a dog. It was crazy. And he would show these things, and everybody would sit back and go, oh my God. That's what I did with this rabbit thing. So the whole Grok generated this image, and I said, put a happy rabbit in front of the White House with American flags. And that's its imagination about what a perfect little happy rabbit looks like. That's Grok's imagination.
Well, I feel for him.
It's also his imagination of what the White House looks like with flags.
But the thing is, LLMs now, it isn't, yes, that you're talking about, but that's past. That's 5 years ago. Now LLMs have the probabilities of sentences following one another, and they have taken on narratives. So that's how they can escape from all these sandboxes and stuff, is that they have the narrative of escaping from a sandbox in them.
That's what transformers are. Transformers are just intersentence relations. They're just what's the past context in which this sentence is being understood.
But they're doing several sentences now.
They do. Well, they actually are doing the current sentence. That they do anything that is a focus of attention from prior sentences. Initially it was from the prior sentence, and then it became the prior 5 sentences, and Now it's
Yeah, the whole
now it's not 6 things; it's 50 things. Okay,
yeah,
that are,
the constant drone or whatever it is.
yeah, that's what the human brain does. The human brain basically has an unlimited number of things that it can bring like that. Okay, but
We got one more juror to go here.
Yeah, we gotta go.
Okay. Can I
Okay.
just say one more
Yeah.
thing from Mohammed about his clock thing, which is nice. I would say a stopped clock merely confirms the cycle of the hours. It's not correct as a clock. There you are. That's my answer to that.
So did I do juror 7 already, or?
No, that would be me.
Okay.
Whereas my mother, the grammarian, and maybe Andrew would say, I should say, is that would be I. But either way,
Okay.
I'm here. Juror 7, ready to go. All right. I agreed all the way down. I found Grok's work very educational. It helped clarify the points you've been making all along these many months or years, Bob. And coincidentally,
I've been making these points for 40 years.
Yeah, 40 years. So chat, the reference in the chat that Andrew referred to, I posted. It was the second chat today. You might want to look at it. It's a YouTube video entitled "They Built a Human Brain." And it was fascinating. I'm sure you would be fascinated by it. So you can look into the chat. There's a link to it there, a description of it. It's right at the top of the chat. This week, this sounds crazy, but I was invited to be a panelist by a friend of mine who's a theologian. And the topic of the panel was whether or not God is a bad communicator. The purpose was to have all these people from different sects of Christianity that disagree on theological points. And so they were to discuss how the YouTube and social media has really put these different schools at each other's throats in modern times, and whether this was said anything about God's nature or whatever. The thing started devolving. These guys started going at each other's throats. So finally they came around, and I'm wondering, like, what in the hell am I here for? I'm a Buddhist. I'm essentially, from their point of view, I'm an atheist, right? So anyway, when it came around they wanted me to say something, and I could only think about Bob. And so I said, hey, any statement can be a lie or truth. And they all jumped on me. 2 + 2 is 4. And I said, obviously, you guys must be aliens and not from the world of exponential powers like me, because 2 + 2 is 4. That's not the whole truth. The whole truth is 2 to the first power plus 2 to the first power equals 2 to the second power. And they all like shrugged about it, like, okay, you got it. I said, I don't think there is a theological answer here. The answer is sociological. What sociological things are driving you guys to be distracted by these arguments when there's real life to be lived or whatever?
So there is a good, I can't remember the guy's name. He was actually a South African writer. He's of British descent. I'm trying to remember his name, but he wrote a book on this kind of stuff. But he was going into the parts of the brain that yield these different sociological components. He was a neuroscience guy, but he was tending toward the cognitive, but also tending toward what the different brains bring. One of the things he points out, for example, is one of the things I pointed out, that some of the brains that you have inside your head are actually reptilian in nature. We have a lot of things that drive us that are not logical, but they are learned, whether they were learned by evolution or learned episodically by evolution with strong or weak episodic components.
Brian's been making an important point here all along, that perhaps the choices we should have to make as plaintiffs would be, is it a lie? Is it an untruth? Or is it the truth? And right up front to emphasize their view on the intent involved. I think Brian might be making the argument that the verdict of what is the deceit, is it an untruth or the truth? And then in the untruth,
that's what the dissection really does. There are truths that are not intended, and there are lies that are not intended, for example. And that people will say, yeah, that's a lie, but God didn't mean it.
Yeah, I used to get buried in the meta truth court stuff. And I've really, as a moderator, I've really come around where the loosey-goosey is useful. It allows people more expression and often does stimulate more.
Yeah.
All right, that's it for me. Thank you, Bob.
Okay. Yeah, I'll see. Juror 8.
They're unfinalized, so I don't think we have a
Okay.
juror 8.
Okay. This sounds good. We'll have another trial next week. There will be a trial in the future that will be another version of the Rester Tester where we try to make a product and give all the revenue to the Truth Court. But the next week, I think I'm going to do one on physics where I don't know how many of y'all know what Euler's formula is. I'm just curious whether anybody here knows what Euler's
Nope.
formula is. EULER.
Yeah.
Heard of it.
Okay. Who
No.
said yes? Who said yes?
I did. Yeah.
You do?
And juror 7, Murphy, said yes as well.
Yeah. That's an area where physics deceived themselves and then they turned out to be right. But they don't know why they're right. And they keep lying to themselves about it. So it turns out there's an interesting case to be made around Euler's formula, which is considered by mathematicians to be the greatest formula of all time. And physicists.
Are we talking about e to the I pi plus 1 equals 0? That one? Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I'll probably do that one next year. I think the paper's ready for that one. It's an interesting thing to see what's gone on in their brains in coming up with all of this stuff. Because once you understand what's going on in these people's brains, it's staggering the way that they've lied to themselves. Okay.
It's staggering to listen to physicists argue
Yeah.
right now whether AI has cooked physics. Like
Yeah,
it's cooked math.
those are evil people. I know some of those people. They're completely evil. So, we actually have it over at CMU. We have discussions where we bring the AI people and the physicists into the same room. And it's like war. It literally is like war. The physicists all sit in one corner and the AI people sit in the other corner and they want to kill each other.
That will be an interesting session there.
Yeah, it's really interesting to watch them do it.
Most of the mathematicians have already given up.
Yeah, the mathematicians gave up. Okay, so we'll see y'all next week.
All right. Bye, y'all.
Adios.
Bye.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.